Hi everyone, we're just going to do a quick audio test here first, and then we're going to give some time for folks to join. So please hold on, the webinar will start very, very soon. Hi everyone, the webinar will start very shortly. We'll just give 1 minute here to allow everybody to connect, to tune in. Just a second, please. All right, let's get started. Welcome everyone. It's a pleasure to be here again presenting for the wonderful IGDA community. So thank you so much for having us. Major thanks to IGDA for our collaboration. It's always great to work with you. And today I'm here to present with the awesome Lisa Wood again. We presented way earlier in the year, and that was a whole different world, right, Lisa?
Oh, it was a different world back then.
So different. So today we have a whole new topic. You know, when we were talking to the community back in what I believe was March, right? Early March or
February.
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 Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So even before a lot of things, we we're talking about a lot of good practices, right? Really looking at content moderation from multiple points of view, and how do you fundament that really well. And of course, today it's time for us to talk about what is in front of us, but also what's next, right? How do we get ahead of the curve, given that nobody expected what happened starting in March? And how do we scale? How do we maintain our automated efforts to foster healthy online communities in games, right? So today, I just want to first say that we have a short presentation. We're gonna have questions and answers at the end. So it's meant to be something that hopefully will provide you with value. There will be a lot of information here, stats, metrics, and we want you to leave armed with something that is tangible and valuable. So I'll just give a quick introduction. My name is Carlos Figueiredo. I'm Director of Community Trust and Safety for TwoHat. I have been in the company for almost 6 years now. Previously, I worked for Disney Online Studios, and I'm also a co-founder and a vice chair of the Fair Play Alliance. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. And I'll let Lisa introduce herself. Please, Lisa.
Yes. Hi, I'm Lisa Wood. I'm currently Director of Research and Data Science here at TwoHat. I joined TwoHat back in August of 2019, which feels like was a really different time back then in August 2019. But before that, I was a video game producer for 13 years. So I worked in AAA, independent studios, sports, and mobile. So, and including Club Penguin. So I come into TwoHat with lots of video game experience and still feel like I'm part of the industry.
Awesome. Thank you, Lisa. In terms of what we want to accomplish, we want to look at fresh stats and what really increased chat volumes mean. And we're going to look at very recent ones, recent stats that will give you an idea of what's going on. Is that curve flattening, or are the chat volumes increasing? We will also look into some good practices regarding how you can be prepared for the influx of chat, how you can keep a scalable and manageable process as well internally. And we'll have some ROI discussions. Let's look at why do you need to do this? Where is the return on investment? We'll wrap up with takeaways, and then we'll have questions and answers. So first, I just want to give a very brief introduction to TwoHat and what do we do, right? We have an AI-powered content moderation platform that classifies, filters, and take action on all sorts of user-generated content, primarily usernames, text, but also images and videos. And we, as of May, we processed over 100 billion pieces of human interactions. And this is still the case for us. We're processing a lot of user-generated content every month. In terms of vision, this is really important for anchoring why we do this, right? We really believe in this particular case, with most of our clients really being gaming companies, we believe in gaming, online game spaces where everybody's free to play as themselves, right? Where there is inclusivity, there's diversity. We're able to facilitate a place where people are free of harassment and they're free from abuse as well. That's really critical for us and goes hand in hand with what we are seeing in the industry. So we're very happy to play that role. Let's take a look in terms of the chat volumes that we have seen through the pandemic and how things have progressed for us. If we go back to February, where we were just saying, Lisa and I presented to the IGDA community back then, we were processing probably around like a third, right, Lisa? It was essentially a third of the volume. And you can see a very rapid increase month over month. And essentially that tripling happening between February and May. And to put into perspective, what does that mean, though? 100 billion human interactions classified and processed in a month. If we're talking about in terms of an anchoring point, let's look at Twitter. That's 6 times the volume of Twitter in a month. So it is definitely a very large amount of data. And we're going to talk about automation today. It's essential, right? You just can't get on top of this volume and of moderation needs by employing only humans. It's definitely not scalable, right? And there are other reasons too, like you don't want to overtax your team. There are many considerations for their well-being as well. And more than that, we do this with like under 20 milliseconds. And this is absolutely crucial, right? When we are playing an online game, you have to be able to communicate on the instant, on the spot. There is no time for latency, for lag there in that communication. And we are analyzing human interactions to a very deep degree, which is not only the context of the phrases that are said, but also the user context across multiple messages too. So it's deep textual analysis. And this is very, very hard to do. So when you're doing this across over 100 billion lines, of course, it's quite the challenge.
So this is what it looked like week to week as the situation unfolded from February to March, and you can see the vertical line where the lockdown started. I mean, the volumes just, and this is for a group of customers with a variety of different type of games. And where the lockdown started, and you can just see how the volumes jumped up as everybody was sent home and had nothing else to do, and they went online. They because you weren't able to go outside, you weren't able to socialize with your friends anymore, so people turned up to their to online games and reconnecting with friends there. So you can really see how in March how the volumes increased, and it was fast. It was not over the course of 5 months volume tripled. They doubled within a week, within 2 weeks, and now as countries are opening up again, you can see, depending on the type of game, that the curve is flattening even in terms of our volume of chat. But that's not the case for everyone. There's still, like in teen social networking, for example, like that's still going strong. Teens are still online, they're still communicating and socializing with each other online, even as the Northern Hemisphere rolls into summer and as various countries are opening up. Then the next question that we usually get is like, well, how much? So great, volumes of chat have gone up. What about the volume of the not good chat, the questionable chat, the stuff you don't necessarily want to see online? And this is the same group of customers from the previous chart, and you can see that over the last few months, I view this as being relatively flat. It's within 5% is high-risk chat is occurring as a percentage of overall chat volume. But as a percentage, even though your percentage of high-risk chat, and this is the stuff you don't necessarily want to see online, and you certainly don't, you know, um, you certainly don't want your kids to see online. Uh, so as much as the percentage is pretty constant, if your volume triples, your volume triples. So even though your number of people who engage in this sort of chat is your percentage is about the same, your number has tripled, and so that's how many more messages that you're still getting of high risk chat. If you go to the next slide, please. So yeah, what's next? So we've had this massive increase, and we've had, and we're seeing all of these changes. What's next? Is there going to be a second wave? Are we going to continue to flatten the curve, both for COVID and for online chat? I don't know, Carlos, what do you think?
I really think that the best thing we can do is to be super prepared, right? In terms of looking at how the next waves are very likely to happen, and we'll have maybe lockdown happening in different countries in the world, depending on which areas, which markets the gaming industry is servicing, each game is servicing, they could have an influx of players at any point, right? So I think we really need to be prepared for that, and this is what our next point in the presentation here is about, right?
So before we talk about what next, the first question we have to ask ourselves is, what have we learned? So next slide, please, Carlos. Thank you. So what have we learned? Well, as I mentioned before, well, more chat volume means there's more hard stuff to read. That is, people are engaging online, they're exchanging more messages, but it just means that there's more hard stuff to read. And it's hard both on the audience as well as the moderation. If you have human moderators moderating all of this, it's also hard on the human moderators to read all of this stuff. So then it's something that we've learned. It's like, okay, the internet is the internet. Things are going to happen, but the more interactions that you have, the more of this you're also going to have. And then next comes growth. As I showed in the previous chart, growth happened fast. Like it was not over the course of a couple of months. It was the course over a couple of weeks of where everybody was sent home, had nothing to do, and then went on to their favorite games and started socializing there. So if you're relying on a moderation team to read all of this hard stuff and take care of all of this hard stuff, it takes time to hire and train a moderation team to keep up with these volumes. And on top of it, you're also dealing with remote working. How do you align your moderation team on what is acceptable, not acceptable interactions in a community? How do you help them understand that, in this context it's okay, and in this context, no, it's not. It's really difficult to do. It's difficult to do it when you're all in the office together. It's even more difficult to do when everybody's working from different locations. And then, this is where I put my former producer hat on. It's like, what's the cost? to handle double the chat volume or triple the chat volume, and to do it so quickly. Like, how much is this going to cost, and how do we maintain this? These are serious questions that every game, every product has to be concerned with. So, it comes down to, is like, well, when things grow ridiculously fast, automation really helps.
Absolutely. And this is why we want to be able to help you prepare for a second wave or for a third wave in some cases, right? And we put together a checklist that perhaps some of you already had a chance to download. It's a free download that we make available. And by the way, at the end of this presentation, there will be a contact. Feel free to email me, to email TwoHat. We'll give you the checklist. We can even give you this presentation if you see the value. And I put some highlights from it here, but essentially it's really important that you have a system that is stress tested, right? That can scale as needed to the rate of requests per second that could happen to you. You could see your volume doubling overnight. Like, this is not unheard of. So it's very important that you do that stress test for whatever system you're using. Also, having that system that can do elastic scaling, right? It will adapt regardless of the volume that you get there, that you're ready for it, that there is this functionality, this elastic scaling functionality embedded in your system and in your practices. When you're using a vendor, of course, the question is in terms of how solid are they overall. And one of the main points to consider is the service level agreement. Are they solid agreements? Can you rely on it? Is it battle tested, right? In terms of uptime, are we looking at the 4 nines, right? In terms of uptime, is this what they can guarantee for you? Because nobody wants to be kept awake in the middle of the night to go and, or even worse, to actually get uh, out of bed in the middle of the night to go and solve something in the system. So it's really critical that you look at those points. And of course, low latency. You definitely don't want to be dealing with the latency, as we mentioned before, if this is going to result in a bad user experience and you're going to not be able to tackle the concerning messages on the spot, or just delay things for your players. And we find that a good reference is 200 milliseconds or under. This is really where we put a good baseline for folks to consider. So now I want to take a little bit of a different approach that perhaps we don't take a lot in content moderation. And this is where I'm going to also put my Fair Play Alliance hat and also things that TwoHat does too, right? And say, we need to be more proactive even. We need to look at how we are designing our game, but also our community. And what can we do definitely upstream at the onset of how we are facilitating player interactions? How can we create it in a way that will reduce the amount of negative behavior downstream? And this is really important to think about, because you change the things way before they become a problem, right? This is where we should be playing if we want to have any hope to foster healthier online communities. So the first recommendation I have for you, I will straight up say it's harder to do, right? I understand that as game devs, you have strains on your time, right? You have a pipeline, you have a backlog, you're trying to deliver an awesome game, and you have competing priorities as it is, right? However, this is really important to consider that if you're able to implement systems that reduce the friction for your players and set up expectations really well, like Lisa said, what is the expectation in this context, right? In this competitive game with a team based approach. What is appropriate for the interaction between teammates, right? Between opponents. And there are many ways you can do this. I put some examples there of course, the honor system in League and also Overwatch endorsements. Those are great examples of how do you foster sportsmanship in the game, how do you also set up the expectations even from the moment you're queuing up for a game. This is really important. And in addition to that, I put another example, which is Sky Children of the Light. Beautiful game that has this whole idea of beautiful social design in everything they do, right? From the very design, from the very way that they designed the friend interaction, how do you level up your friendship with everyone, to their areas in the game where you can socialize. It is really beautifully done, and it's a way to encourage that um, playing together, that feeling of playing together, of collaboration, of being better together when you're playing. So I really encourage you to, if you are not familiar with those, to take a look. And yes, it's hard to implement some of those features, but if you are in the middle of product development right now, why not consider this? In terms of onboarding new players, this is a medium challenge, right? Like, it's not as challenging as the prior point, but if you're able to surface your code of conduct when you're onboarding a new player, this is really important. You're setting the tone. You're setting the tone of what your game is about. And if you're able to put those prompts in a way that, of course, they are appropriate for the tone of your game in terms of visuals, in terms of the narrative of your game as well, well, even better, because then it's not going to be jarring for the player experience, right? And it shows that you walk the walk. You care about a community that's free of harassment and abuse. An example of this here that Lisa mentioned as we were preparing for this webinar, and then we added, it's Animal Crossing New Horizons. The prompts, right, Lisa? When you go to visit somebody else's island, and there is a reminder there.
Yeah, they do a nice job of making sure that, hey, before you go off to somebody else's island, like, please remember to be nice.
Yeah, it sounds simple, right? It sounds simple, but this is effective. And I can use a couple of examples from the games industry. One, for example, Twitch has done an A/B test, for example, in a study a few years ago. And for the group that they were popping up the code of conduct when they joined a channel and they had to actually go and click it, they measured that negative behavior was lower in that group, right? Because there was that reminder. I know that Reddit has done something similar with this and other companies as well. So, this is not just an idea. This is actually effective. It is important to be able to do those things. And of course, within the what is appropriate for your community, right? The third one that I have here is leverage warning messages, right? I think it's very well established that we are trying to not just use punishment, right? Not just the ban hammer. Those days are gone. Just thinking about players as a very binary thing, as either you are a good actor or a bad actor. We know that life is not like that. We have bad days, right? And yes, there's some people who are definitely very focused on being disruptive, and yes, have practices to deal with this, right? But when it comes to the average player experience, what you have there is that there's a chance to nudge players in the right direction. So if you can warn them once they're going down an unproductive path, perhaps of abusive behavior, you can warn them before you have to mute, before you have to suspend, and all those things, right? This is something that a lot of TwoHat clients do, and they do it to a very good result. They see that it makes a difference. I would love for us to actually do a white paper on this one day, Lisa. I think we can do this. It's my hope, no promises, but we will try to surface some tangible results. I really believe in this. I have been seeing how effective this is from the time I worked for Club Penguin. So I will recommend you to do this if you can. Use a system that allows you to automatically warn players. And here's a bonus as well. During a time of increased volumes, it's very hard to deal with the workload and what do you automate versus what do you need human eyes on. So focus on the things that are a direct breach to your code of conduct and community guidelines. Focus on the behavior that's the most concerning to you. Double down on that. Have that clarity and double down. Put your priority there. Did you have a point to add, Lisa? I saw that you were unmuting there just in case.
Oh, it was just you were talking about doing a white paper, and it's like, okay. I no, I think it's great because it's something that game developers struggle with. It's like, okay, do we warn? Do we mute? Do we how do we get the best behavior out of our community? And I think that yes, I think a white paper would be very interesting on this.
Completely off the cuff, just putting ourselves on the spot. Again, no promises, but I would love if we could do that. And if anybody watching this has ideas, if you have been measuring this, if you want to talk to us about this, always up for a good conversation regarding this. So what, right? We were talking about like all those things, but where is the return on investment? Because again, you have a pipeline, you have a backlog. It's tough for you to convince your teams to do changes in your product as it is, right? How we know that convincing teams to do modifications on the way you do content moderation or player dynamics and trust and safety approaches, it's really hard. So that's why we intentionally put this ROI conversation here, because we want to show you what can make a difference in terms of your growth and your retention. We want to show you how tangible this is. So the first point is, let's talk about retention, which we know it's hard earned, right, Lisa? You put a game out, you are living and dying by those metrics,
Yeah.
right?
You want to get people into your game and you want them to stay and you want them to enjoy their time while they're in your game.
Exactly. So this, Lisa, with her experience of an exec producer, and of course all our clients, our team too has some experience on this. We know that this is critical. So we have been thinking about this a lot. The amazing team at the Anti-Defamation League has been working more and more with the games industry and looking at harassment and hate speech within the context of the games industry. Last year, they put a great a study survey out on this, and it's related to hate and harassment and positive social experiences as well in games. And one of the stats that really made me stop and think, wow, this we're starting to get very meaningful stats now. The players are telling us, right, that they are quitting games because of harassment. This to me is a game changing moment, because we knew this as an overall idea. We need numbers. And in this particular case here, it's 19% of the players they surveyed said they quit playing certain games in reaction to harassment. Let's stop to think about that 19%. We're talking about nearly 1 in 5. We're talking about hard earned retention. Can we afford 1 in 5 players to quit because of harassment in our communities? I think this is the really hard question that we have to ask. And that's why we started putting together an ROI calculator to really look at first, using some well-established baseline metrics in the industry, right? We're talking about retention on day 1, day 3, day 7. We're talking about all those metrics that are really well established, and also the average revenue per per daily users, right? And then you're looking at that. You're looking at all those metrics that perhaps I'm sure you're already tracking all those things. And I am borrowing the 19% here from ADL, and I'm putting on the calculator, right? Because I don't want it to be an assumption from my mind. I just want to say, can we agree that this is reasonable, right? This is a survey that was done. I know that EA Games has also conducted surveys last year with their players, and they had even higher numbers in terms of how this has affected their player base, and they have reconsidered things. So it was a number a bit bigger than 19%, but also different metric. But regardless, we are talking about players telling us that this matters to them, right? That they are reconsidering playing games because of it. So when we throw that number into our calculator, this is what we are seeing, right? Like a 19% of difference in retention. What would it do over time? And we were talking about the midterm retention because we're discounting the early retention. We consider that early retention is much more dependent on a lot of other factors, like do I like the game, right? Is this the type of game for me? Am I having a good overall user experience on the way that this game was designed? I mean, that's outside of the scope of content moderation and online behavior. But when we're talking about this area here, we're looking at the mid area of retention, right? Where this can really make a difference. And right there, you can see like the line that you're looking above is the new retention, right? As opposed to the line you would have if you were not using a system like TwoHat's Community Sift to safeguard your community from abuse and harassment. That is the
And
tangible difference there.
yeah, and when you're talking about millions of players, like every percent counts that stays in your game longer and enjoys the experience and contributes to the community. So, it's every percent counts.
Absolutely. So, what's the revenue impact? When we're looking at that impact, it's really hard to overstate it. Like if you're going to look at all those retention metrics, and then you consider like what is the difference using a system like ours on that blue line in the graph, and you can see the tangible impact here, the revenue increase over the course of those days you see on the left, right? By the time you have a whole year, you're looking at like a retention difference that you can't ignore the revenue increase that you would have as a result of that, of protecting that retention, right? Do you have anything to add here, Lisa?
Well, just to call out, like this is what you're seeing in the charts here is an example. So it's an example of a game that has approximately 5 million players, has a very typical retention curve, and like look what a massive impact that couple of percent difference makes over the long term of retaining those players. And now if you have a bigger community, the impact would be bigger. Smaller community, obviously, it depends. What I really love about this calculator is that our customers can plug in their own numbers and see how that has an effect on their game and their audience.
Exactly, and that's a good call to action, right, Lisa? If anybody wants to run their numbers through our calculator, send us a message as well. We're happy to do that. Because really, the reason to show you this is let's really fundament the things we're talking about as an industry. Let's show the return on investment. Let's walk that walk as well. One last point of retention, because I'm mindful of time. I hope you can stay to join us for a Q&A. It's I think it's such a we're so passionate about this topic here that it's just it keeps growing, keeps growing on me, and I would love to hear your thoughts. This last point here is about, we discussed the growth side of the return on investment, the retention side, which is obviously the most important. But we want to talk to you about also how do you avoid costs, right? Like this, because we don't want to incur extra costs. Like Lisa said, if you're going to double your volume, triple your volume, like you don't want to put more cost in front of you, right? You want to justify that retention and that growth you're having. You don't want to increase costs on your departments. One of the costs is manual moderation. Like we're looking here at one of TwoHat clients last year before they implemented our proactive filter. They had roughly, I believe it was 500 user-generated reports a day, correct, Lisa?
Yep, that's correct.
And then if you have a small team for that particular game, let's say, you have to review those reports on a daily basis. Sometimes folks might only have one person responsible to do that, right? And they might have to hire more people over time. But once they implemented the proactive filter, you can see here the decrease was incredible, right? 88% reduction in the moderation volume. Now they can operate in a way faster way because there are way less user-generated reports to review because of the implementation of a proactive filter. So that's the power of automation, right?
Well, just to be clear on this is user, to your point, user generated reports. These are users who are taking the time and effort to report something that they don't like seeing. And so by seeing this dramatic reduction, one is that means they're seeing less of things that they need to report.
Absolutely. That's such a good point too, Lisa, because it's a better user experience, isn't it? As a company, you are taking responsibility, accountability for the things you can do. You're not outsourcing everything to your players to take care of all the safety, well-being elements in the community, right? Like they do play an important role. They have to let us know what's inappropriate as well, and press that report button, but the onus cannot be on them alone. And when you look at, we're talking about costs, if we can agree that 2.5K US dollars is the monthly salary of a moderator, like the average. If we're agreeing on that, well, let's talk about cost reduction in the sense of, if you're a small company or a medium company, and if you have that volume, if you don't have to hire 2 more people, what is the difference that it makes to your um, pipeline, to your resources overall, right? It's really important to consider those things. And hey, I'm a champion for the content moderation industry. I'm not saying that I don't want people to get hired, but I understand that it's hard to hire. Some companies will struggle to do this, right? So if you can have proactive measures that allow you to operate with the team you have, especially at these times we're living, this is important. All right, in terms of takeaways, so we can get to the questions and answers. Automation is absolutely our friend, right? You saw by what Lisa was presenting, the lessons learned over the last few months and more. It really is your friend. It's critical that you employ automation. It's also very important that you ensure you're choosing a very reliable system, and see our checklist for that. Don't forget to send us an email, and I'll give you that checklist for sure. Also, prepare your system and your team for the next waves, right? Just be ready. We can't let our guard down at this point. It could be sustained, what we are saying. We could see ebbs and flows, so let's get ready. Let's look at some good practices together and get ahead of it. And also, when it comes to how we're approaching those internal conversations and even industry conversations, let's keep the return on investment in mind. So we are thinking about growth and retention of our communities too. And that's it. In terms of our contact, you have it on the screen there. Please send a message to hello@twohat.com. You can also send a message directly to me. Hey, do you want to talk about that white paper? Let's talk about it. Do you want to see the ROI calculator? Let's talk about it. Anything else we can help you with? We're here. And we're open for questions and answers. So if we can get questions and answers on the stream there directly, that will be very helpful. And let's get the conversation going. I'm just going to stop sharing here, and then we can just have our videos on the screen. Let me just see this quickly here. There we go. Oh no, Zoom is just like blocking me right now. There you go. All right. Do we have any questions yet, or anything we can add at this point, Lisa?
I don't know if we have any questions yet. We're still waiting for that to come in. But lots of interesting comments we're seeing in the chat.
Yeah, anything that resonates at this point, maybe some things that folks are experiencing.
All right, just bringing it up.
So just a reminder, you can definitely send us the email. I will share the deck with you. I will share also the checklist, and we can continue the conversation as well if we don't have questions right now. Well, here's a question, Lisa. In terms of, if you're preparing from a technical standpoint, right? You're preparing to do this. How much how much resources do you need to allocate for content moderation, for like dealing with automation, for example, on a dev team? I think this is really like a question on perhaps like how hard it is to integrate a system like ours, and what is the expectation there? Can you offer some perspectives on that? I can offer some too.
Um, I'm gonna say, in terms of how hard is it to integrate a system like ours, well, our job is to make it as easy as possible, and we have a great customer success team that helps out with that. Um, it's again, it depends on how important chat and the social features are to your game. It should be proportional to the game experience. If this is something that is critical to the game experience, you should be investing proportionally.
Yes, absolutely. And we made it as easy to integrate from a technical standpoint, right? What we always talk about, you have to put thought into community design as well, right? Into your code of conduct and all those things. And this is where you're going to spend more time. I saw that we have another question there too, right?
Yeah, well, a couple of them. So one question was about creative ways of building consequences into gameplay. It also depends on your community. It depends on your age group. Obviously, you take different strategies depending on your age group. But I mean, I'm going to start with the Animal Crossing one because that's the game I'm currently playing a lot of. I love being on a resort island where everything is pleasant right now. Um, but it's introducing it at very natural points. It's like I'm not constantly being reminded to be a good player. It's like, oh, okay, you're about to go visit somebody's other island. Just remember to be you're an ambassador of your own island to be a when you're going over to somebody else's island. And so I really like how it's very a natural fit into the overall gameplay because the whole premise of Animal Crossing New Horizons is that you're building this fantastic resort island and everybody wants to visit and you're an ambassador when you go off. So it's a very natural thing. If you were doing a military game, you would probably find some more military type theme with respect to like honor and duty and being a good team member and a representative if you are if you're interacting with other teammates. So, it's think about, and this is, I guess, where your narrative team can really get into this of like, okay, what is the world that we're trying to build? What is the narrative that we're trying to build? What makes sense in this environment? And then kind of build that naturally into the overall experience. Because you don't want to break the fantasy with like, follow the rules. It needs to be in the context of the fantasy that you're trying to build.
There has been some companies have done this really well. Epic Games, for example, with some of their games, even using the characters from the game. I can't quite remember now which game it was, but one of the characters, she is a police officer in the game. I think it's the game that preceded Fortnite, like the like what is the one I'm thinking about here?
Yeah, it's not coming back to me,
Yes.
but yeah.
So, but they use those prompts. If reported someone, for example, they use that prompt with the officer character that says thanks for doing this. So within the context of that game, it makes sense, like Lisa said, right? It's even leveraging a character from the game.
Yeah. And then there was a next question. This is a big one. About attempts. Have there been any attempts to incorporate the legal standards for some behaviors typically subject to penalties? Like, for example, has a company used the legal definition of stalking to draw the line between permissible and impermissible behavior? Wow, that's a big question. Really big question. Something that we are actively working on is refining our taxonomy and that does incorporate some of these things. And by taxonomy, it's the definitions um, of various behaviors, and then what we call risk levels that we assign to it. So I'm not going to stalking. Stalking is an interesting one because stalking is often not just confined to the one platform. It ends up moving across platforms, and that's a lot harder to track. But that is something that we are continuously refining. We've done extensive research on this front, so that we have so that we are able to classify the behavior and the risk levels appropriately, and so then our customers can choose what they want to do with that. So that is something that is it's something that's actively going on in our industry, and not just in our company.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in addition as well, having a trust and safety specialist in your team as well, who has that training, who can work with your legal team as well to
Yes.
establish those policies, right? To be very clear about that. I think there's some great examples in the industry for just to name one. There are companies now really saying, for example, that yeah, they of course they care about the well-being of their users, but they are not counselors, right? So they cannot provide like just like psychology services. Like they are not trained to do that, right? So they draw that line and they say, we are not able to give you like a formal service towards that, towards counseling or helping you with your well-being. So they have to draw that line as well, because otherwise there's that expectation that the community managers are also playing that role, and they are not, right? So there are so many things to take into consideration, but I think having a trust and safety specialist, having a community manager who can work with your legal teams is really important.
Yes,
And
your legal team becomes your best friend.
absolutely. And I believe the game I was referring to is Paragon
Oh
from
yeah.
Epic Games. Yes, that
Yes. Yeah.
has that the character that was appropriate for those messages, right?
All right. Any other questions?
All right, so I think we're gonna wrap up. Thank you everyone for joining and staying with us for an extended time. Thanks for the questions. Thank you, Lisa. It's great to co-present again.
Yes.
And
Thank
thank
you.
you, IGDA, so much. Really appreciate that, the whole team. Thanks for having us.
And thanks, Carlos, for also being a wonderful co-presenter.
Thank you.
All
I'll
right.
see you later.